everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and ghouls and ghosts and opinions that may not agree, but are lovingly delivered. We will not censor ourselves at all, so consider us PG-13, damn it. Your pro fan base today includes Chaz and Karen Brenchley, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 190. Welcome back to Raven Belasco. Welcome, Raven.
I'm so excited to be back. Thank you, guys.
I am so glad to have you. You were our episode 67, I believe, when we were talking about undeath and romance and blood in the first instance, right?
Yes, a theme that I continue to hold dear to my heart.
I was going to say something. In the spirit of this season, you represent so much that's death and blood and romance and other disgusting things that are so perfect when they're together. We never recorded an episode 69 deliberately because I couldn't find anything perfectly juicy enough. Would you like me to change your number to go back in time to be episode 69?
Would you please?
I would absolutely do that. I'm sure I can almost hear my web spider throwing things at me now for making her life hell. Let's do that for funsies.
I'm going to get a patch that just says 69, and I'm just going to wear it with pride.
As you should. It's, when you think about 69, there's some magic that it really is like a yin-yang symbol, just in the way that it's devised up there, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of one of those perfect numbers in the way that the numbers fit together. I actually, I do photography as well. And there was one time I was walking past this beautiful old door with the chipped peeling paint, and it had this rusted old 69 on it. And I got this beautiful black and white shot of it. And it's one of my favorite shots that I've taken, actually.
That's fantastic. My thought on that is you just had something drop over Halloween, and I hope you were all terribly misbehaved out on Halloween.
Always? It's the rules?
You had a book drop, and I kind of helped pre-push it a while. It's called Adventures in Bodily Autonomy, and is a collection of short stories. It's an anthology, I believe, that you edited, exploring reproductive rights in fantasy, science fiction, and horror. This is a book whose time has come.
It's a book that was called for by the times. Yeah, I didn't really have any choice. It had to be out there.
Was it your original idea?
Yeah. What happened was there was warning signs that they were gonna get rid of Roe versus Wade, and I was feeling super freaked out about it. And I was like, what can I do? And I didn't just want to send like a, $100 donation over to Planned Parenthood. That didn't feel like I was doing enough. And I was kind of like, well, what can I do that's enough? And then, like Athena from Zeus's skull, the idea just like was like, boom. Let's make an anthology. Let's raise some real money, more than I could just, pull out of my pocket.
Exactly. And I think it's worthwhile to say that you are donating the royalties of this one, too.
Yes, 100%.
How easy was it to find a publisher for this?
Honestly, it was easier than finding the first publisher for my books, for my vampire series.
Right.
I think I talked to 3 publishers before finding a publisher. So, I mean, in publishing, that's like crazy easy.
In 3, wow.
Yeah. I did my homework on who I was approaching. I didn't just send it out to everyone. I wanted to stay with a smaller publisher and have a little more control.
Mm-hmm.
But and then there were just a handful of feminist publishers. And Aqueduct Press was absolutely perfect, and happily they agreed that they were absolutely perfect. And I've never done an anthology before, so this was me sort of really boldly going into unknown territory. And so I had been, while I was doing the process of putting together lists of authors I would approach and list of publishers I would approach, and being like, how do I get the authors on board if I don't have the publisher? But how will I get the publisher on board if I don't have a list of authors already in? So I was sort of all doing that at once. And then at the same time, I was cranking out my story to go in it.
I was going to ask if you were putting a story of your own in.
Yes. I wanted to be all in, just every aspect of it. Cause, I'm a masochist and I just wanted to make a massive amount of work for myself.
I was just contemplating of, you almost could collect it of saying that these are just stories that already exist within history or legend. I mean, let's talk about poor Medusa. The girl gets raped, yes, and then they give her snakes for hair. So is it so she can take vengeance upon men, or?
No, I mean, that might just be the bonus side effect. Well, we can't really imagine what it's like to have snakes for hair. I mean,
do you comb them?
Yeah. How do you maintain them? Do they eat their own thing, or do you have to feed each one of them each day? I mean,
ice into your hair.
Yeah. So
now there's a title.
Yes.
Feeding mice to my hair. I like it. We saw this in Battlestar Galactica when, in the new season when Starbuck was a chick and suddenly Starbuck was forced to be pregnant. I could hear the shockwaves all across science fiction. So, and the fandom of the boys were like, wait, what? Because we were used to Dirk Benedict and now we've got this sassy Katie Sackhoff. And then now they forced her into doing something against her will and things changed. And that, I think, opened the door for some interesting discussions from some people that might have never even thought about such things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, when the first Battlestar Galactica came out, science fiction was still very much a boys' club.
It was.
Not that I didn't love it as a kid, growing up. I was super into the Cylons. I love bringing those kinds of issues. Science fiction is, of course, like one of the best mediums to talk about those things, by setting them in a different time and, and considering how we would deal with them in the future. Yeah. Obviously that's the lens that we can kind of cope with to deal with it in the present.
Did you think about making the anthology strictly science fiction, or was it always going to be science fiction and fantasy?
I really wanted to not narrow the range of stories. Mm-hmm. There's, so much to be done with fantasy, and as shown by some of the stories in this book, so much to be done with horror as well. The Things Melody Learns by Jamie Go is, oh God, when she sent it in, I nearly fell off my seat reading it. Like, so good. And Bullet Point, which I don't even know if it's science fiction or horror. A lot of these really actually, you have to, like, some of them are clearly in one genre, and then other ones, they're like, oh, it could be this, it kind of expands.
I love that. So how did you go about choosing the writers you wanted and then approaching them?
Well, the first thing on my mind was people of color to the front. Black people and people of color to the front of the list. I wanted to make sure that this was a really diverse collection. And so, just starting to look for writers who played around in genre. And then after that, it was just people whose writing I liked that I figured out, can't hurt to ask. And the first person to call me back, and literally called me, was Nisi Shaw. Okay. Oh. So I'm just sitting there, doing some work, minding my own business. And there's a call coming in that I don't recognize. And I answer it. And she's like, they're like, hey, it's Nisi. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what now? What's happening in my world? And they were like, I've got the perfect story for you. I
love them. They write some of the funnest stuff about good, fantastic fiction, some race, some colonialism, some ableism. I mean, there's a whole lot of interesting threads in their stories.
And Queen of Dirt is just I'm gonna just keep saying that about like every story as we talk about the stories. Like I love
talk about the stories, because what we're trying to do here is say everybody needs to go out and buy this thing so that one of these stories is going to speak to you or somebody you know.
Yes. Well, that's the lovely thing about having that full range of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Like there is absolutely something in here for everyone. And the joy of me saying that as the editor is that all the reviews are coming in are saying the exact same thing. So I'm feeling like I'm, allowing a little pat on the back. Because at the time it was just like, for a long time, it was just super stressful. Like, how am I going to force this thing into reality? How do I make this thing happen? With literally no idea what I'm doing. And I don't think I realized in the early stages that it was actually going along pretty fast and smoothly.
You don't realize that you're being unheard of in your speed and decisiveness in the publishing industry. Well done, you.
It's really best not to know what you're doing.
Did you get any oversight from Aqueduct?
No, they left me completely in charge. They gave me some. I asked them for a list of their preferred authors to contact. I wanted them to feel like it was a really solid anthology, and I knew they had a good bunch of authors they'd worked with. And some wonderful people came in from that. That was kind of the finishing touches stage, where it was just like, okay, we have these stories. How do we round it out? And I reached out to Aqueduct, and they gave me the list, and it was just like, boom. Okay, we've got an anthology. Almost everyone wanted to be a part of it. I think so many people I reached out to had felt that same feeling that I had felt of, how do I do more in this situation? So I was just giving them the opportunity to do that.
No, absolutely. Were you sent any stories that you felt you couldn't use?
There was one that was a retelling of Thomas the Rhymer. And or no, it was one of those. It was one of the myths. It might not have been Thomas the Rhymer. It was one of those, and the author just didn't realize that so many other people had done it and done it very well. And I just had to say, like, okay, it's a great topic, and it's an interesting treatment, but there's just too many of these retellings in the world. Like, something a little more unique is needed. Yeah. I felt bad because at this point, I understand the drive of everyone who wants to come in and be a part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one was one I had to pass on, and I hope she places it somewhere else. I don't think, I actually sent her like a list. I went up to Wikipedia, and the list of people that had retold that myth was so long that even I didn't know all those versions. Yep. Yeah. And it was just like, yeah, maybe you like, it's a great story, but maybe you need to retell something that's been retold a few less times.
I liked where Ellen went on her story of Goodnight Moons too.
Oh my God.
He's sort of a heart wrencher, as they all are in their own ways, but what happens, why it kind of was a beautiful illustration of why certain people that say we should go colonize Mars are just so full of crap they don't even understand. Yeah. Welcome to not understanding physics, you idiot. And Ellen gently danced past the gravity and a few other problems, during the idea. But First Potty on Mars is magnificent and sad and real.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about it, was the realness of it. And it really kind of, that I love that we put it as second in the anthology, because that made it grounded. And I'm like, this could happen. And when you do that, it's suddenly then you're reading the rest of the book and all the other stories, no matter how fantastic they are. Ellen has already prepared you for this could happen.
Doing the layout, actually, I sat down for it and I was just like, okay, here we go. I've never done this before. It's going to be so hard. And it wasn't. The stories just naturally lined up You know, like it was so obvious where each had to go.
Okay, that's fab because I had a collection, a sort of best of, published a couple of years ago, and I was in such a tizzy about how to order the stories because this is like a lifetime's work.
Yeah.
That my publisher paid a friend of ours to suggest a story order for us, and then Karen and I sat down and no, that's wrong. Obviously, this has to. It was easy once we had a list that we could argue against.
Well, news for people putting together anthologies. Don't worry about that step.
I think there must be an art to it, and maybe you just instinctively managed it beautifully because I think of, I love short stories. I love collections of short stories. So if you didn't like that one thing, that's okay. You'll get something new the next. Although these were all fun and different, but the way you kind of settled it, you like said, here's my introduction on both sides. And then here's my queuing up that you need for everything else. So you can go weird in format and different in storytelling techniques and all of the different neat ideas and things that you've arranged in that. But it's kind of a logical thing that makes it easy to follow. That you've given me something, okay, that was good. I'm ready for something new now. Hey, you throw something completely new and different. And I liked how you did that. For instance, you went from Clages to, and forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce Alcala.
Yeah.
Kathleen Alcala's story. And that it's different. And it's done in a different style, in a different way. And it kind of, in a weird sort of way, was right after I finished with this, oh, dear God, Ellen has ripped my heart from my body again.
Mm-hmm.
She will do that.
It's something different.
That was one of the real bonuses of having chosen to do the multi-genre anthology was I just had that range to play with. It wasn't a worry of, oh, I'm going to put a story that's too much like another story next to each other. I mean, I couldn't have done that. I literally couldn't have done that.
So you've produced this fabulous and timely anthology. Do you have any ambitions to do it again?
I have to have a little while to recover and forget how hard it was to kitten herd, because us authors,
Kittens.
we do some things on our own time.
I once I once succeeded in shifting a bunch of writers from a library to a pub. You wouldn't think this would be hard, but herding a dozen writers from library to pub, I had to go back and forth so many times. It was ridiculous.
I really wish I had been there for that.
And I don't know, I'm just having a picture of somewhere at the end of it, Chaz rocking back and forth, holding Teddy Bear very tightly.
my teddy bear has seen much usage like that.
But did you bring Teddy to the pub and you had a pint in one hand and Teddy in the other? That's the question.
I didn't have him with me at that time.
Oh dear.
I take him with me when I travel, but not when I'm, at home, as it were.
See, you needed me there. That's what I'm for. Like other people.
That's true.
I have a stuffed animal I used to travel as well.
Yeah, it's important.
You have one other exciting thing here that's happened with Halloween, and I wanted to make sure that we touched it because I had a couple questions. When first we chatted about your Blood and Ancient Scrolls series, which was Blood Ex Libris, Blood Sine Qua Non, and Blood Ad Infinitum, and you were relaunching them in Halloween. You kind of mentioned in when we were chatting back and forth about this that there were challenges. And would you tell us briefly the story of the challenges a writer can have when you've published something, but publishing companies are coming and going and going and coming? And tell us the story of Blood and Ancient Scrolls in publishing.
It is a saga. I shall try to keep it shorter. When I wrote the first one, Blood Ex Libris, I really wanted to make something that crossed genre lines and play with both horror / paranormal, but also have all the aspects of like action adventure, but then also have a really deep historical basis. And for me, that was like, well, that vampires need all those things. You can't do the vampires without the historical. They've been around a while. They have chips on their shoulder from centuries ago that they have to work out. So for me, that, and I'd seen people talking about how like the books of the future were gonna, push the boundaries and be multi-genre, and I was like, yes, I can do this. And then I started shopping it around, and it turned out that a lot of agents are scared of multi-genre books. They want something that sort of neatly fits in a little box that they can, sell to the publishing company, and nobody's too stressed out or worried. So it took me 5 years to place Blood Ex Libris, and I was getting a little desperate by that point in time. I had this real fear that someone was going to just come in and steal the ideas, without knowing they were my ideas, and publish something that was so like my book that I couldn't publish it. And so when LMBPN said that they would publish me, I was just like, yes, let's do it. And they're like, okay, 3-book deal. And I'm like, oh my God, finally, my dreams are coming true. But what I hadn't realized was they had a very different focus with their writing. Their authors publish about 6 books a year, and they really, that's the kind of energy where you make money on quantity. And I always intended to just write 1 book a year because it takes me that long to do all the research for it and write it and edit it and those little details. So in the beginning, it was okay because I had the first book written. By that point in time, I had the second book half written. So, meeting a tighter deadline for the books seemed, doable. And it was like, well, after the first 3 books are done, then we'll revisit, deadlines and stuff. But I also hadn't realized that the person who read the book only read the first 4 chapters.
Oh, what?
Yeah. And the sex scenes in the book start in chapter 5. For me, with the sex scenes, I wanted them to be integral. Like, I didn't just want them to be thrown in there, it's like, oh, we need to put a sex scene in here.
Formulaically, there's whole genres where you have to be having sex by page 32 or.
Yes. And then like every 78 pages thereafter. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted, like, if there's going to be sex in this book, there has to be a reason why we're doing this. And that actually really helped shape the Ammer, the vampire's name for themselves, like who they were, and how they vampire. So when the protagonist is being welcomed into the world of the Ammer, there is a fair amount of sex because reasons, valid reasons to the story. And then we go off and we do lots of other stuff. There's plenty of other types of action in the story. But, in the first book, there's a section where it's pretty hot and heavy. And this publisher was actually getting away from being kind of a Christian publisher, which I did not know at all. And they were fine with the most explicit violence in the work. But basically it was like, then the male and female protagonist would go to bed in 2 separate bedrooms, or 2 separate beds. So my books didn't fit and they didn't know what to do with them. And by the time I was, I'd written, finished writing book 2 and we were getting it out, I was like, okay, these aren't getting proper marketing and they won't market it on their main, like one of the big reasons I'd signed with them was they had this huge mailing list, thousands of people on this list. And that's who I thought the books would be sent out to. But because they had sexual content, they weren't going out on the main mailing list. So suddenly I'm this second-class citizen. And there were even moments where one of the person who did the reviews and interviewed me was like, oh, well, people can just skip the sex scenes. They can just skip past them.
But they're integral.
This is my own publisher saying, oh, you should skip sections of this book when you buy it.
I have never heard that, and I've been in this industry a very, very long time. That's just remarkable.
And I was just like, well, I don't belong here.
I'm just actually trying to picture I can't think that I've ever read a vampire book where somebody wasn't, maybe Martin's Fever Dream, because they were pretty disgusting in that. But
Yep.
that's the only one I can think of.
Well, I mean, the vampire, as we have them now, comes from like the fevered sexual pitch of the Victorian era, where the biting was standing in for the sexual act. You can't subtract sex from vampires, really. Like, the earliest myths of them, when they're loathsome, things that come out of the grave, we've moved past that, and we've had Dracula, we've had Anne Rice. You can't put the sex back.
I was brilliantly up at a SteamCon in Seattle, and it was Carrie Vaughn and another gentleman whose name I forgot. But the question came up of, vampire or werewolf. And I think it was Carrie that cocked her said, do you mean necrophilia or bestiality?
I'm sure it was Carrie who said that.
I was sure it was.
And that's the thing, I didn't think that my sex scenes were that spicy. They're detailed because I think I should put the same level of detail into a sex scene as I put into the violence. Noosh, the protagonist, is chopping off people's heads because, you have to, get the vampires out of commission, the bad guys. And there's really vivid descriptions of her battling and learning how to fight. So for me, it would be weird and wrong not to put the same level of detail into consensual loving.
Blocking matters,
Yeah.
Same in a fight scene, the same in wait, I thought they were still wearing underwear. Where did the underwear go? I wondered.
But yeah, I had, in the years before I wrote this book, I'd been just checking books out of the library and just grabbing paranormal stuff, I'll just try this one. I'll try this one. And there was one time I was reading a book and it had a werewolf and a sorcerer and a vampire and this chick, and they were all having sex. And I was like, well, I'm not sure how we all got to be in a cave all having sex, but okay. And then the werewolf shifted. And I was like, well, okay then.
Size queens.
I was like, wait, somebody might have mentioned, I'm okay with this, but I should have had a little warning this was coming up. So when I wrote my sex scenes, I was like, oh, I'm well within the limits, I
was once obliged to write a review of a very, very bad contemporary fantasy novel, and I did point out, for the benefit of the readers, that the heroine literally slept with everybody, including the goat.
So there you were. You've got 3 books out with people that aren't marketing it and aren't sending the lid. How did you go about getting your rights back to it?
Well, I decided that it was such a tight writing schedule that it actually forced me to just get book 3 out and not really think about anything else except book 3. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to meet my deadline, with book 3 and not fight it and not bring lawyers into things. And I know they're not going to market it right. So I'm not getting the sales I liked. And in my contract, it said, if you don't have X amount of sales, you can just walk. And I had retained complete rights to the books in the contract. So
that's a clever little cause. Is that standard, or is that something you asked for?
If you're doing the kind of halvesy publishing that this was, where they deal with getting the cover done and getting you out there, well, to some extent, getting you on Amazon and, and stuff like that. But they're just doing that aspect of it. So if you have but you have to do all your own publication, marketing and promotion. I mean, you should definitely be retaining the rights. And if you get a publisher where they try to take the rights and then leave you doing so much of the work, no, walk away from that contract.
The reversion of rights contracts in traditional publishing have been a source of disquiet, basically forever. But any decent contract will say, if sales fall below X number a year, then we will deem this book to be out of print, and therefore you can revert the rights. A lot of small presses omit that clause, which is a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I had gotten help reading the contract, so
Hmm.
I knew that was in there, and so unfortunately, I was in a place where I was counting on it. Like, oh, they're not going to market it well enough for it to sell enough copies for them to
To retain the rights. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a plus for you, and at the same time as being such a minus.
Writing the third book, I really had to force myself to focus on the story and to know in my heart that someday it would get marketed correctly. Because if I thought about the fact that the whole company didn't get me, but also at this point in time, I'd ended up with this really antagonistic relationship with my editor,
Mm-hmm.
which I cannot recommend to anyone. So I knew it wasn't going to get a good edit from her, and then she was angry at me because basically at this company, everyone's writing fast, 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 fast,
Yeah.
fast, and they're just happy to be getting a solid edit, like, with all the punctuation errors and spelling typos corrected. That basically she sends back her edited copies. People hit select all, select all, accept, and they publish.
Okay.
And I was never going to do that in a million years. And so she was like angry at me because she felt that she should have, all her edits should just be accepted and that was done. But then she was doing things like in the first book, I had described one of the characters as voluptuous and she changed it to skinny.
What?
And I was like, I don't think you think that word means what it means. So after that, she was just kind of angry at me. So the company didn't get me. The editor was rapidly moving to a hatred of me.
Mm-hmm.
And on the final book, I knew it wasn't going to get a solid edit. So I worked my ass off to edit it as well as I could. And now I firmly believe, like, as someone who's been a writer and an editor, that my book is not complete until it's had another set of eyes on it. Like, I'm a good editor, but editing my own work, nah.
You can't. I've said this 4 times in the last week alone. There's no programmer that should be allowed to debug their own code. There's, Karen's going to agree with me here. You don't see all your own flaws. You can't.
Yep.
Sure. It's inherent.
Yeah.
I tend to argue with editors probably more than I should, but I still didn't want. There was this one relationship I had with a publisher, a major publisher, which went sour for reasons not of my making. And at one point he did say, "Chaz, would you rather just not be edited?" And I was sufficiently sure of myself to say, no, I wouldn't. I want otherwise on this. The relationship between author and editor is almost as crucial as the relationship between author and agent. And when that goes sour, it can go very bad indeed. So you sound as though you were unhappy with the final texts.
Of all of them, I knew they weren't done. They'd gone out into the world, but they weren't ready, and that hurt.
So have you revised them for this re-release?
Oh my God, they have been polished to a high gloss. First thing I did was find a good editor and send them to her and say, please pretend they have not been edited. Go hard. And she just absolutely got me. It was the complete, suddenly reversal of the situation where I just had someone I was completely simpatico with. She was in love with the characters and fighting for them, she was on their side and trying to write them as well as I was, and make sure that their words got across as well as possible. Oh God, yeah, like total tears. Like so that was like after I got out, after I'd done the legal flaming poop thing, that was like this immediate reward.
That's lovely. Was the legal flaming hoop thing difficult?
It was. Their lawyer just takes herself very seriously, and things were.
Did it come to the point where you needed a lawyer of your own?
No, I managed. I had someone on like tap if I needed them.
Yep.
But everything managed to stay, amicable. It just was a little tense. because they had never had anyone pull out. And so I think they were a little offended that someone would choose to do this. And there had been things said to me that I hadn't checked in the contract, and actually was like, one thing was we had gotten covers made for the books, and I had been told by my editor that I had already paid for those. They would be taking the proceeds out of my income from the books. So I assumed the covers were coming with me, and then it turned out later, it buried in the contract. It was, if you leave, the covers remain with the company.
What? Hang on. They made you pay for the covers, and then they kept them despite not actually having the book.
No, it turned out that they hadn't they sent over proof that they had not taken the money out for the covers. Okay. Then they wanted to charge me for the covers, at which point it was like, oh, you can take those covers, fold them into all sharp corners, and they were lovely covers. I was very fond of them. I just wasn't going to give them another cent of my money at that point. And it was like, well, good luck reusing those covers, because they're so specifically for my work. So yeah, you guys can just, sit on these covers that you wouldn't like.
They will doubtless AI them into something similar, but
yeah. Anyway, that gave me the opportunity to get shiny new covers on.
Yes. Tell us about the process of getting shiny new covers.
I just had a period of some days where I wandered around the internet looking at artists and seeing like who might fit. And then I found this lovely artist named Quasi, and I contacted him, and he was up for doing the covers. He had just recently done some work for Disney and Marvel or DC, I can't remember which. Okay. And I was, when he said yes, I was just so super excited. And then I had a huge folder of images and paragraphs from the text with descriptions, just sort of worked through what would be on the covers, and they're amazing. The first cover, has the main character, and then it's big scimitar coming down. I actually, to keep costs down, learned Adobe InDesign and designed the covers. So the artwork came from him, but I actually did the cover layout myself. Okay. Which I don't recommend, actually. I thought I'm really skilled in Photoshop, and I thought that those skills would transfer over into InDesign. And that was an incorrect assumption.
They don't. Tools are all weird. Well, if you send copies of the new covers, if you would like, we would be glad to put them on the episode, which will appear on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. Raven, thank you so much for coming back with us today. And everyone, you got to go out and buy, first of all, that Amazing Adventures in Bodily Autonomy. Truly great short stories. And you have a link for us for the Blood and Ancient Scrolls for where we can buy them in the future. I have an old one, but I'd like them to have the new ones with the new covers.
And the much tighter edit.
And the improved editing, because like fine wine, you clearly make things better.
Oh my God, you make me blush. I will absolutely get those links to you. And also, I really love interacting with people. So, if there's anyone who has questions about the series or about the anthology, I love getting an email or chatting on Facebook Messenger.
We will put all of your links out there. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
It is always a pleasure to be on Writers Drinking Coffee.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web mummies are Dave Welsh and John Schmidt. Our intro and exit music are performed by the demonic Michael Engberg. You can hear more from him on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsors are Magnificent Halloween Candy, Jackal Designs, The Bean Scene, and Arm Street. And hey, thanks for listening.